Hello, hello, this is Chris Park from Arkin Games. I'm going to try and make this tutorial as brief as possible. However, it's not a straightforward topic, so we'll just see how it goes. So this is a past bake that I've already done with Mesh Baker Pro. And what you can see going on here, this is just a kind of weird test set that's showing both some bone animations with the eyeballs and the neck, as well as these are all blend shape animations that are on for cheeks and eyelashes, stuff with the mouth, all that sort of stuff. This is mocap of me, actually. And I recorded this for a different character and then just applied this to her to see how it would look. And, the mocap doesn't translate very well with the facial morphs compared to like humanoid body avatars. So at any rate, so that's what's going on at the moment. Now, I had to make a number of changes in order for this to come through, because otherwise it was bringing across my blend shapes. But in the last video that I did, I failed to notice that the blend shapes portion wasn't actually happening. All the bone animations were happening, and there are some bones in the face that control things like eye movement, neck movement, that sort of thing. And I was thinking that the blend shapes were just too subtle or something. And so it was clear that they weren't working. You can do things like directly tweak the blend shape yourself to test if it's working. But that doesn't mean that your animation is going to connect over. One of the really key things about how Unity handles blend shape animation, which is different from how it handles skeletal information in a humanoid, is that it does not do retargeting per se. When it is doing blend shape animation, it looks inside your hierarchy from the animator, and then it is looking for a specific skin mesh renderer with a game object name of something, whatever it was that you were using. In this case, CC base body, character creator from iClone. And then it's looking for exactly named blend shapes. It does not remap these. Now, when you first are blending, or when you first are merging something using Mesh Baker Pro, it's going to append, so that there's no conflict, it's going to append the mesh ID after this. It's like lip open -4881 or something like that. That's no good, because then your animations will not work. There's something in the documentation about some sort of dictionary that can be created. I don't know anything about that. I didn't see any further documentation. I don't really want to go through a dictionary step of trying to map these things. I don't have a reason to want to do that. In my particular case, I have two skinned mesh renderers which have blend shapes on them, and they don't overlap. One is the overall face, overall body, which has pretty much all of these things to do with the mouth and all that sort of stuff. And then there's the tongue, which has just these. Now, the fact that the tongue is separate means that it's going to be looking for whatever the name of the tongue skin mesh renderer is, and it's not going to find it. And so all of these tongue shapes are not going to come through. Normally, that's not going to be too much of a problem. With the facial mocap that I'm doing, it doesn't even capture tongue motion because it can't see it. I'm using Faceware real-time for iClone, in case you're curious. However, if you're combining this with like phoneme-based type lip sync. That's going to add some realism by doing tongue motions to try and mimic the sounds that are coming out, and those are not going to come through if you do what I've done here so far. The other thing is that right now, the way that this is set up, I've got one skin mesh renderer and I've got 4 submeshes on it, each of which has its own material. There are pros and cons to that, but one of the things that I want to do is I want to have, as I'm sure lots of you do, I want to have the hair behave like hair. I don't want it to just be this stiff part of the mesh. Now, you could do that in a variety of ways. I mean, anything from applying cloth physics to it to using something like VertExmotion, which is a really cool tool. I think I'm probably going to use VertExmotion, but I'm kind of leaving things open. I may use OBCloth. At any rate, what you don't want to have is you don't want to have one giant skinned mesh. This is like 60-some thousand tries that is being processed by the cloth renderer, for instance. That's just out of the question if you're doing a cloth renderer. Because for the one thing, you don't want the rest of her behaving like cloth. And for another, it is going to be a lot less efficient, even if you're pinning the cloth and stuff. So it's like, oh, well, she's all cloth, but only that one part of her, works that way. No thanks. So really what I would like is I would like to have 3 skin mesh renderers that all share one set of bones. I want the hair separately because I want the hair to be something that I can apply cloth physics or whatever to. I want to have her tongue separate, specifically so that mocap will come over properly, and because it's got its own morphs. And then I want everything else to be all together. The way that it's got submeshes and materials, I don't care about. That's fine. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. It's from some old work. So I've already got this set up here. I've got an MB3 texture baker script added, and I've got an MB3 mesh baker script added. I've got my Ellie Weston M12, which is a newer version of her. There's constant issues with, poke through and that sort of thing. So I'm always making more adjustments as much as I would like to stop. I think I've just about gotten it, but when you've got the multi-layered clothing and so forth, that's just the nature of it. So, all right, now I can see both of them here, and I can copy this animator component. Actually, I'll just not copy the animator component, but face animation test and pull that here. So her avatar here, right now it's generic, which we don't want. So we want optimize mesh off. We want it to be humanoid, create from this model, yeah. Animation, there is no animation in here, but if there was, you'd want to turn off animation compression and turn off resample curves. I'm going to go ahead and hit import. I'm going to pause while I do that. Okay, so she's imported now, re-imported now. So now if I hit play, then I should see the facial test works on her too. And you see the cheeks and everything moving. There's not just the head. And, eyelashes are moving and brows and all that stuff. So we're good to go. You'll notice that there's a difference in coloration. That's just because of the way the materials are set up at the moment. So she's got all these different sections to her, and then the root here. All of these are skin mesh renderers, all these other things. Everything from wedding rings to, the cloth and, all that stuff. So when I look in here, um, one of the things that it's doing is it's using this new embedded materials thing, which is really not all that helpful in my opinion. It's something that they've added in Unity 5.3, but a lot of times you can't edit the materials properly if it does it that way. And now you'll notice when I change that, it says it's legacy. It's legacy as of 27.3. Now it's got materials that are separate from this, and then it's pulling in. I can't fathom a situation where I would want to be locked into specific shaders and textures that are coming in with the mesh. I almost always repaint my meshes, so that being legacy is kind of laughable to me. That's pretty much only going to be legacy if you're working in Maya and you're painting in Maya and you're importing from Maya. That's it. I work in Substance Painter, and yeah, that's not legacy for anybody who's doing that. So, okay, now we've got these things in here. Now we can actually change what the shaders are. Now, it's going to try and combine all of these things, and I don't really want it to do that. Now, my my issue is that we can't blend. Well, I tell you what, we don't actually have to futz with the. There's a couple of different ways that this could be handled, depending on exactly how optimal you're trying to make your textures. Because we're going to have a certain number of set pass calls, which means a texture is coming off of the GPU and off of CPU and RAM and getting sent over to the GPU. Now, the smaller those are, assuming that we're going to be sending something separately anyway, the smaller those are, the better. You're not going to get any instancing on skin mesh renderers. It's not possible. And even if it was, the different things that are sharing materials here are different meshes. So you're not going to get any instancing. You're also not going to get dynamic batching because that doesn't work for things that are A, skin mesh renderers, or B, have any substantial number of polygons above like 900. The static patching is just for stuff that doesn't move. So there's going to be no batching or instancing of any sort available in any of this. So the less data we can send at a go, the better. What we can go ahead and do, though, is just handle the textures as if they're all one big map and then go from there. So open tool for adding objects. Selected object here, and we say it's okay. The ones that have out of bound UVs, add them. Here we go. All right, so now we've got all of these things. And now I'm going to create empty assets for the combined material. I just got a little baked folder here. I'm going to do LEM12. Been through this way too many times. Oh, yeah. And we'll call this LE7, Roman numerals. Multiple combined materials, build source to combine, blah, blah, blah thing. Complains about something not being a normal map, fine, whatever. So now it's created way too many materials. What we do want to do is we want to say I don't care about either of those things. I don't want either of those. So when I go to LEM12 here, I've got all these materials. I'm going to delete them all. Come back here, minus all of that. Build again with these two options off, and it's combined them differently. And so these are the submeshes that it's expecting, and these are based off of which shaders are in use. Now, one of the things I was contemplating doing was splitting it out so that certain different we actually can do that. We'll do this. This will be handy. This is the most efficient way to do it, and so let's show it this way. All right, so we got the sheath and belt and blah, 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 clothing stuff, body stuff, eye, teeth, tongue. All right, so first of all, I'm going to delete the tongue out of this list, and then the hair. Noted those as being the two things that I want to do separately. And so we're going to pull those out. So now we're going to pull this again. And here we are with these 2048 is what I want for this. We'll do that one more time. Okay, cool. So we've got these. These are LE7 things. I'm going to hit bake materials, and then it's going to take a little while. I'm going to pause this again. Okay, so that finished doing its thing, and what you'll notice is that it suddenly looks weird, and that's because it had to change all the normal maps to not being normal maps in order to read them in. That's perfectly fine. It's just reflecting strange now. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is, yes, include normals, tangents, UVs, also blend shapes. We're ignoring the light mapping stuff. We're going to bake into a prefab. We need a skinned mesh renderer. I do not want it to optimize. That will be very bad. The center mesh render bounds have had not so hot results with. So, so we'll call this LE7 main. And I'm actually going to call this Mesh Baker LE7 main just to keep track of it. I will then drag this into here and then delete it up in the scene. Now in this has to come from the project. If you drag it from the scene view, it's going to freak out. Drag the empty prefab in there. It's got a game object, but otherwise empty, into the combined mesh prefab and hit bake. This is quick. Quick being a relative term. The other thing took like 5 minutes. So, I'll pause again. Okay, here we are. Another 30 seconds passed there, so not too bad. It now has added an LE7 main up here. Now, several things to note. One, it is sharing the bones of the original. Now, all of these original skin mesh renderers point to this one bone tree here. That's fine. The new one now points to it as well. Make a copy of that, it's going to freak out. But delete it, it's going to freak out, blah, blah, blah. We're going to set up 2 more skin mesh renderers using MeshBaker Pro that both point to these bones. Now, what we've got here is something that I'm going to call CC-based body. Reason for that being that those animations that use blend shapes are going to be looking at this. I'm not going to bother fixing her normal map stuff yet because there's not a point yet. Okay, you'll notice that the mesh is set to none for some reason. So you come down in here where your prefab was and you assign in the mesh from there. And then the other thing you need to do is assign the root bone to be your thing from up there. Now you will need to move this over into your prefab for the prefab to actually work later, but we're not done yet. So one thing at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the original here. Oh, well, when I hide the bone root, of course, it freaks out for that reason. But I'm going to pull this bone root in here. And then, so there's her body, but she's not drawing. Oh no, what's going on? It's because her bounds are way off, which pretty much always happens. So just zero these out the center. And then bring that up a little bit and then set the Z to be a bit higher. And yeah, here we go. That's where she'll be called from. Now, this is what we want. You'll notice if we go into her mouth here that there should be no tongue. Yep, no tongue at all. Versus on her, you can see the tongue there. And hers, there's not. Obviously, there's no hair. Again, this is what we want. We should be, at this point, able to go ahead and copy over the animator, though, and paste that here, and then see them both doing their animations. Where the other one went, I'm not sure. Okay, she zipped off for some reason, but at any rate, you can see her blinking and all that sort of stuff, so you know it's working. She's blinking, eyebrows, mouth, all that stuff. We're good to go. All that's working, even though she runs away as soon as we've got. This has to do with the skeleton not being zeroed. Now the skeleton zeroed, and so let's bring her back over. She may flip backwards. Yep. Don't ask me why this works, because I'm not real sure. But at any rate, double 180s there. And so here we are. All right. Now, so this was our first one. We want this to share the same bone root, so we're not going to create a separate, we're going to hide this one for a second, but we're not going to create a separate, we're not going to drag in LA Western M12 again and work off of that, because we want to keep using one bone structure from multiple skin meshes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to copy Mesh Baker Orig twice more. I'm just going to put them here so they're all together. Mesh Baker LA7 hair. Mesh Baker LA7 tongue. All right. So at this point, I can just drag it in because there's only one. So object to be combined, hair. That's it. I'm going to create an empty asset for it under baked, LEM12, LE7 hair. Okay, just created that. 2048 is going to be the max tiling size again. Force power of 2, blah, blah, blah. Multiple combined materials if need be. There. I don't think we're going to need more than one. Yep. And it's only got one there, which is great. I'm adding 2 draw calls by adding these 2 separate skinned mesh renderers, both of which have a single submesh. So 2 draw calls is, to me, a very fair trade-off in performance compared to trying to do like cloth simulation on the whole thing, or trying to do or just not having the lip sync working, or trying to do some sort of intermediate dictionary. So, all right, Meshmaker 3, keep doing all the stuff you were doing before. Yeah. This is hair, so there's no blend shapes to include, but why not? Let's say that. Skin mesh renderer, we need a new prefab here, so this will be LE7 hair. Drag that into there. And we'll say LE7 hair. Saying include the blend shapes is not going to actually do anything. I don't want to optimize this one, even though I'm not as freaked out about it with the hair. I've already optimized that with a few external tools, decimating it and stuff, and I don't feel the need to let Unity do that again. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hit bake. Shoot. Bake into prefab is what I really want. I7 here. There we go. Bake. All right, good. Now we've got the hair. So now we've got this thing here, and this has got her hair in a separate mesh. I'm going to copy this into this other prefab, and I'm going to rename this just to be consistent with what I originally had, because why not? RLG6 hair. This is still attached to the other set of bones there. So we again have the problem of, well, 2 problems. One is our mesh. The other is the bones. And then the other is the bounds. Oh, the bounds are like nothing. So let's do like 1 by 1 by 1. It's huge. And for some reason, the z-axis is what's up on this. I don't see this hair anywhere. That's peculiar. So yes, update when off screen. Oh, there it is. For some reason. We'll do this just so that we have an absolutely massive. It's really not listening too well here, is it? I'm going to take off the bone root temporarily. Yeah, that just doesn't want to move. In an ideal world, what we want to do here is have this thing come on across as a separate mesh. It's not actually doing that. There are some ways that you can split off submeshes as separate individual meshes, but that's really not the top of my list of ways I would like to do this. So it's report. Yeah, okay, fine. Did all that. Let's just delete that out of here and bring back in our, this might be the problem. We've got another copy of it up here. And I hate it when that happens. I'm not sure exactly what the deal is with that. All right, so there's the hair, and it's appearing at the right spot. Yeah, go figure. And we'll attach it to the bone's root here. And now it freaks out because it doesn't have the proper positioning, the proper bounds. And that'll be good. 6.44.2, not 1, 2, 0.2. Maybe a little more, 0.4, because this is going to be moving around some. This is just for, the culling, so I really don't care much about that. I should be able to move this here as a child now, and I should be able to get rid of this. And now I've got this, and her hair is moving along with the rest of the bone movements. It's notable. It's still using those bones. This mesh is not a child of the head or anything like that. So it's not just moving because the head is moving or because it's, Unity style childed to the head bone. This is using the same skeleton instead. All right. So at this point, I have myself a hair mesh, which pulls out a lot of the polys right there, 12,000 vertices, 17,000 tries, and lets me do my own thing with this later. And then, of course, with her main body here, I've got everything except for her tongue and her hair, and that's down to just 40,747 tries. So, hooray. All right, final step. Gonna hide her again. I'm gonna go ahead and apply this prefab though. Now we've got the tongue, and we're going to drag in the tongue. Okay, good. The tongue is its own object, of course, because that otherwise it wouldn't be able to have its own morph shapes. It wouldn't have this problem if it wasn't its own object. So this is actually very straightforward. Just bring this over here. I don't even have anything to with the hair. I had something to merge because it had a couple of submeshes. With the tongue, if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't have any submeshes. But I still need a texture result off of this, so we're gonna go through this process anyway. All right, so create empty assets for the combined material. Baked, LEM12, LE7, tongue. Alrighty. Yeah, 1024 is fine, and 2048 on this because it'll automatically be smaller anyway, but I do not want a giant tongue texture. There's no point. So we'll do a bake. That was fast. And then same as texture baker, yeah. Import blend shapes for sure this time. Skin mesh renderer. Bake into prefab. Do not optimize. And so then we got LE7 tongue. Now here's where I got tripped up last time, and you'll get this repeatedly, is I didn't delete this object. And therefore I wound up with two of the same thing in the scene, and one of them acts really weird. So don't do that, or you'll be searching around like I was. All right. Now I've got LE7 tongue here, the prefab. Drag that in there. All this stuff looks okay. Hit bake. LE7 tongue did its baking. Now we've got LE7 tongue up here. There's nothing really to see. That's positioned way off there, but I don't really care. Let's go ahead and drag in the tongue mesh. Where to go? There it is. All right, so we've got our tongue mesh now, which we can't see because the well, I guess we can see it. I was gonna say we can't see it because the bounds are off, but let's see how our bounds are doing here. Yeah, they're way down there. We're gonna bring this to 0, 0, 0. Notice this is going to the root of the bone tree here. So you have to bring this up. And yeah, I'll just say 0.1 in all axes. Her tongue's not going to get that far out of her head. if it does, we have problems. You can see the blend shapes here, tongue up, blah, 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 blah. However, if I don't do this one, so I dragged that out of the old prefab it was making. If I don't name this the same way, then I may as well not have separated this out at all. Now I come in, copy this in, CC base tongue. I've got all this stuff here. CC base body, I've got all this stuff here, no tongue. And so now I have the blend shapes and everything split out as my animator is going to be expecting. Now I don't have any animation on the tongue, so I can't show you for sure that that works, but it does. And and you can verify that it does simply because the rest of this works. So I've got 3 skin mesh renderers, 5 different submeshes on there, 6 different ones. So we've got 1, 2, and then 4. So 6. It's not the cleanest process, but it gets the job done. And at this point now, our number of set pass calls is as low as we can possibly make it. We got 28 draw calls right now. When I get rid of this, we're down to 13. So, that's a lot more draw set pass calls than you might, or batches than you might think. But you do have to remember that we're talking here about the shadow casters and all that sort of thing. We do want the hair to cast shadows, but the tongue really doesn't need to. So we can turn that off, and then immediately we're down one batch. With the body, you don't really have that luxury, and the reason for the extra set pass calls that are coming from the body is because it's doing a shadow and regular pass off of each one of these. So you're running into it from that reason. So, and of course, don't forget to turn this off in your actual prefab when you're not in play mode. So this gets the job done. And she's now ready to be fully animated and everything. I can do cloth or whatever other physics on her hair. Her tongue will animate properly. I knew what I was forgetting to show you. There's a thing in the code that you're going to have to change. This is not showing any code that's going to harm the Meshbaker author, but do a search for add blend shape frame, and you'll come up with a few different ones. There's only one of them, though, that has name in it. All the rest of them are adding them to other, either defining things or adding existing ones to shuffling them around. This one, though, is the problem one. It was saying blend shapes I.name plus the game object ID. And that's where I was talking about. It was changing the name of these blend shapes here to be like, open dash 400 or, various other things like that. I already had fixed it on that one. So that's no good. You're not going to be able to get your animations actually working, even though the blend shapes are over properly. So I just commented this out right here, but you can go ahead and delete this additive bit. Now, what that does mean is if you are blending multiple skin mesh renderers together that do have conflicting names, I don't even know what the behavior is going to be. It's either going to error out or it's going to have some sort of undefined behavior. So I'm assuming you know what you're doing in terms of saying you want your blend shapes to stay the same name and you want them to stay on the same named game object with the skin mesh renderer as they originally were. So if you're combining them across skin mesh renderers, you're already losing the ability to animate without doing heavy remapping of some fashion that I don't really know how to do. I'm sure I can figure it out, but it seems easier given that you're going to have a lot of animations, but you only set up the thing to be animated pretty much once you finally get it working. I think it's easier to set up the thing to be animated correctly the one time, and then all the animations just come on over. So anyway, that's it. That's the one line of code that you have to change in there, and then this is the process. These are from iClone, and the process would be very similar for DAZ, Poser, etc. Thanks for watching.